All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, thanks for joining our afternoon workshop sessions for Thursday afternoon. Is everyone enjoying the conference so far? Great. Well, this afternoon we have Shawn Howell from S.A. Howell, LLC, and his presentation on Mission AlignedData-Driven Approach, an introduction to innovative thinking. So thank you so much, Shawn. And a reminder to everyone to use the link in the app to review and to sign in for your session through those SurveyMonkey links. And with that, I will turn it over to Shawn.
All right, thanks, guys. Oh, do we have a number? We have a number 4 coming in? Sweet. All right, I think this is the first time I've met all of you guys. It's really weird. You guys are like way back there. Y'all can come sit. You should all sit like right here. Why don't y'all come up front and let's just make this intimate. I wish I didn't have to use a microphone because I would just sit down at the table with you. But yeah, I think this is the first time I've met you guys, any of you guys. I do a lot of work with the National Roma Network, so a lot of people work with me and know me from that. But this is the first time I have taught in Colorado. But I am a nationally certified Roma Master Trainer. There's just like 35 of us, I think, left in the nation. Josiah's one. Do what? Oh, cool. Great. But amazingly, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us here. So Josiah, PJ, Fred, myself, and Andrea. Barbara just did virtual this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my training class was with Barbara.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Barbara's awesome. We all love her. And she might be listening in, so we have to really talk. Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? You'd think they were an old married couple or something. Don't tell them that. And this is being broadcast, though, so now I'm really scared. But yeah, this past year, I published a book. If you guys are interested, I have those with us. But the content of the book is really what I'm going to be talking about today. So, another thing I'm excited about is I was like born and raised from this network. So I like grew up as a Head Start student, and my mom ended up being a Head Start teacher. So, you know, this has been in my blood since as young as I can remember. My family had to use weatherization and CSBG funds and just everything that you can imagine for being a part of this network to live growing up. So, super excited to be able to give back. All right, today I want to talk to you guys about excellence. I believe this is a word that we use a lot in this network. We talk about standards of excellence. There's awards out there about excellence. But I really don't know that we think about how we can define what excellence is about. And there is an official definition, but to me it's still vague. It says it's the quality of being outstanding or extremely good. But, you know, where does good end and excellent start? And what about awesome or wonderful? There's not really a defined metric for any of those. So I believe that understanding excellence, you first have to understand what success is. And this was a journey that I actually started taking several years ago. Seattle, Washington. Is anybody in here Roma certified yet? Have a certification? I know you're working on it, but so there's a thing we do every year called ISEP, which is our continuing education for Roma, and you have to go in the old days before COVID, pre-dinosaur world, we actually went in person and had these courses, and then that actually turned into a kind of a virtual thing after COVID. But one of the last ones that we did was in Seattle, Washington. And that was in 2017. And during one of the breaks, I was out in the hallway, and Fred Richmond, you guys know Fred? Everybody knows Fred. Fred actually grabbed me in the hallway and he's like, "Do you think people are actually getting this?" And I paused for a minute and I thought about it because I work as a consultant. I worked in the network, just so you know, for about 20 years and then stepped out to start doing consultant work. But I usually have about 40 different agencies I work with at any given time. And I started thinking about the agencies I worked with, and even as a master trainer, some of the Roma professionals I work with. And I told Fred, I said, I think most are just going through the motions. And that was right during like organizational standards. People were just kind of learning about those, and there were mandates through that. So this is something that really bothered me as I started thinking about it. It's like, we have this organization that's amazing, and it's done so much for my life, and it's done so much for so many others, but the people who are working at these agencies really don't get the accountability piece of it. They don't get outcomes, they don't get change. And so I started looking back at the agencies that I have worked with over the years. And I started trying to figure out how they measured success. And so I found that there were really 4 basic categories that they fell into. And the first one is what we call the compliance mentality. And that's where it's like, okay, if I check all the boxes, if I do all the things and I don't get in trouble, then we're good. Okay? And even when it comes down to like implementing Roma, you know, most agencies don't even look at it like this. They kind of look at it as pieces without the arrows. And then if you want to be honest, they really just see it as a checklist. You know, we have to have a needs assessment. Okay, we did the needs assessment. It may be good, it may not be good, but they check the box. We have to do a strategic plan. Most of the time it doesn't have any connection to the needs assessment, but we did one, so we checked the box. And then, okay, we get down to implementation. We got to do something. Okay, we're providing services, so check. We get down to results. Did we have an outcome we can count? So check. And then evaluation. Most agencies don't even go there. But because on that CSBG annual report, there's a comparison between what you did and what you're supposed to do, they consider that to be evaluation. So they check the box, and then they look and say, okay, we did everything on the list, so we did Roma. And that's the way most agencies really kind of look at Roma, to be fair. But that, like I said, that's what we call the compliance mentality. It's just a lack of findings. It's just like we did the base amount that we're supposed to do. And there's even one agency, I do evaluations for states sometimes about just to see, are the needs assessments up to par, are the strategic plans, organizational evaluations. And there was one agency that I was always looking through their strategic plan. I was reading through it, and it's like, okay, this is all the things we did. And I'm like, is this an annual report? Because it was all about the past. And I finally got to the last page, and there was one goal. And the one goal said, to maintain our status as a CSBG eligible entity. It was like, just keep the money flowing, you know. So that is the epitome of the compliance mentality. But the problem is, compliance doesn't make you good, it just makes you legal. But there's so many agencies that are stuck there. Now, there's a second mentality, and you guys have probably seen this around too, whether it's your organization or those around you, where they just look at what they're doing. It's what we call the service mentality. And we even talk about this in the introduction to Roma training, so you've probably seen this since you're going through that process, the provision of services model. You serve a lot of customers with limited impact, and sometimes this enables the continuation of poverty because you're just giving out food, you're just paying utility bills. We see this a lot throughout the network as well. And this is really not what the network was created to do. We were not intended just to be a service provider. And so even we look back to Lyndon Johnson, when he signed the Economic Opportunity Act into law, he actually said, you know, that we're here to provide opportunity to people. And that word opportunity, you can think about that as giving people a chance. Now, if we weren't living in the environment we were living in right now, I would even equate it to the word equity. You know, that's what he said, is give everybody an equal chance to where they can make it. It's a bad word these days, so we can't say that word anymore. But just think about opportunity as giving people a chance to make it in life. But he goes on, he says, for the purpose of the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, that's the act that created community action, is to offer opportunity, which means what? Yeah, equity, giving people a chance. not an opiate. So what's an opiate? A drug. All right, so when you take a drug, you get addicted, right? And so that's basically what he's saying here. Is when you just give out food and you just pay utility bills and you pay rent payments, people are going to get addicted to that. And that's not what community action is about. It is about getting people to a point that they have an opportunity to take care of themselves. So that's what Johnson was basically saying. And he goes on again, he says, our American answer to poverty is not to make the poor more secure in their poverty, but to reach down and help them to lift themselves out of the ruts of poverty. Now, anybody know who Sergeant Shriver is? Who's Sergeant Shriver? Not CSBG, but yeah, the original design of economic opportunity, yeah. David Bradley's actually the CSBG author. But yeah, it's basically CSBG before CSBG was CSBG. But yeah, I'd like to call him the architect of community action. So he also felt the same way. He was not big about welfare. He said that the CAA, so that's you guys, is not to be simply a dispenser of welfare or social services to the poor, but it is to be a source of leadership in identifying and eliminating the causes of poverty, the things that make people poor in the first place. I want to see if I can take this because I'm not used to standing still, and this is driving me insane. I'm like used to being out in a crowd of people. All right. Is that too loud now? Okay. Maybe they can hear this too. All right, and another person that you may not have heard of is Margaret Washnitzer. Have you heard of her name? So Margaret Washnitzer was a director of the Office of Community Services back when Roma came out. And so shortly after Roma was introduced, she made this statement. She said, CAAs must not focus on program-based delivery systems, but rather see how programs work together within the agency to promote change, not just provide units of service. So basically, it's okay to want to help as many people as you can, but large service counts don't always help people the way that we think. Okay? So let's go to the next level. This is the results mentality. And we really start moving into a good direction here because we're focusing on change, not just doing things. But there are some issues that we run into. One is a lack of focus. You can count outcomes in Head Start, you can count outcomes in your community services, different programs that they operate, you can count it in LIHEAP, but if they stay disconnected, there's still a problem in your organization. Even though you're looking at results, it's not the organizational change. And so this kind of carries off from the lack of focus. We have program segregation. Has anybody seen a Head Start program that doesn't know what community action, the community services programs do? Yeah, it's pretty common. And they don't even like each other. They're like, we get the money, you guys are just along mooching for the ride. So we say that a lot. So program segregation is a problem. And then a lot of times we see, of course, that the different programs have different databases and the data never merges together. So we have analytical deficiencies. So, hello. So there's analytical deficiencies. So basically, you really don't know the full impact of the organization because everything's separated out. You don't know the organization's story because you can't pull all the data together. And when you don't know the story, you can't tell the story. And so when you can't tell the story, then you have a lack of community support. And that is what makes a community action agency a community action agency. It's about bringing people in to do the work of eliminating poverty. If you look at our theory of change, it's about bringing the community together to fight poverty, not just doing it yourself in isolation. All right, so if it's not compliance and it's not service and it's not results, what is it? And let me be clear, it's not that we don't want to be compliant, because we have to be compliant, okay? And we want to serve as many people as we can, and we want to make sure that there is change occurring. But the fourth one is what kind of puts us into a new world. And it's what I call the Mission AlignedData-Driven Approach. And the idea here is that success is measured based on the impact on the organization's mission. So you have everything working together towards a common mission and using data to drive decisions. So this kind of goes back to another model that you're probably familiar with from our Roma training, which is called strategic thinking. So here we serve fewer customers, we have a bigger impact, and we promote movement out of poverty. Now, this may not serve a whole lot of people. Andy Stanley, I don't know if you guys have heard of Andy Stanley, or his dad, Charles Stanley. He was like a TV pastor for, I feel like 80 years. But Andy operates a church out of Atlanta. He is the senior pastor of North Point Ministries, and then they've got smaller churches underneath that umbrella. So his is based out of Alpharetta, Georgia, and then there's one in Buckhead, and there's one in Cumming, where I live, and kind of all around the region. But it together ends up being like the largest church in the nation. But very complex organizational layout. And I've watched their model because I think it's very fascinating. But Andy, there's a saying that he has that really resonates with me because of the work that we do in community action. He says, you should do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And I think that really is kind of the mantra for community action. We may not get 1 million people out of poverty, but what if we did it for one? Could we do it for one person? Could we do it for two? Could we do it for 5? Now, there's an agency that I work with in Alabama, in the capital city of Alabama, that they had only been doing service programs for a long time. And I went and did their strategic plan, and they decided that they wanted to kind of shift over, do a case management program, and they started out with 10 people, just 10 for the year. But they had 100% of those people become self-sufficient because they put so many resources, and they were partnering with banks, and they were partnering with employers in the community and colleges. So those 10 people had like amazing resources to push them to success. And so, their next step is now to look and say, can we push us up to 15 or 20 people for the next cycle per year? So you can start and see what you can do to get to a point where you want to be, and then just up it to the point where you see, okay, this is where we can sustain based on the resources we have. But that's really what that means to me. Now, Andy's not the only one that I get to work with. I've worked with Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta Airlines, talked to him about his business models and his upper team. Dan Cathy, who was the former CEO, I haven't worked with his son, but the whole Cathy family. I've worked with their nonprofit camp. I've worked with their main company, their gigs. Horst Schultz, the founder of Ritz-Carlton. This guy is a wealth of knowledge, and I worked for 3 years for Southern Ground, which is, most of you guys probably know Zach Brown Band, but Zach Brown actually has a number of companies under that umbrella. So he actually he had one called Southern Grind. Southern Grind was a knife company. He sold that a few years ago. He's got restaurants. He's had wine companies. He went into liquor distillery. I can't remember what he's got available right now, but he has one that does tanning, like if you take a deer hide, tan that out. Southern Reel, which is who I contracted with, which is a videography company. He is an amazing businessman, more than just a singer. And he is smart because he took the money he's getting in from his singing and he laid out the multiple businesses that would allow him to survive if something happened to the music, which I think is just amazing, but very awesome company. But I talk to these people, I talk to their executives when I work with these companies, and I say, okay, what has worked for you, and how would you translate this into success for nonprofit organizations? So it's just an amazing way to find out their thoughts, because they've been doing big business stuff for a long time. And I've even worked with some of these huge authors that have written business books and do consulting work for $25,000 a day for these companies. You get to be in the same room with these guys, and you want to take advantage of those moments. But I asked them what worked for them, asked them what we could integrate, and then I also started doing a lot of self-study. So like I said, I'm a Roma Master Trainer. I'm also a Six Sigma Black Belt, versed in Lean and PMP. Hoshin Kanri is another one I ran into that you guys have probably never heard of. Agile, Scrum, data-driven decision making. So I went through the process of learning these and getting certified in several of these. And was looking to see how we could pull pieces out of these other methodologies that are used in for-profit business to help improve Roma. That's basically where this came from. So Six Sigma, if you don't know, it is a data-driven methodology. It used statistics to measure organizational efficiency. Its kind of goal is to reduce defects. So if you look, it was originally made for like industry, where you have things going down an assembly line and you want to make sure that things come out the same. Okay? But this can be translated into our network. Our customers getting the same experiences. We have to just define what a defect is in our network. So that was one of the first things I looked at. How do we improve resource allocation to make sure we're using our money wisely? And I think this is becoming more and more important with all the stuff going on in DC right now. So we have to think about how do we improve our resource allocation. So this is another thing I wanted to pull out. And then customer satisfaction. And we're just kind of getting there in Roma in the last few years. We've talked about that, but this is something that I think that we really can definitely focus on from Six Sigma, because their whole thought is it doesn't matter what the product is if the customer don't like it. Even if you think it's the best in the world, it doesn't matter if the customers don't like it. So we have to consider that in our network as well. Now, Lean goes along with Six Sigma. Big focus on value. So again, we have to stop and think what offers value to our organizations, and I'll hit on that in a minute. Elimination of waste. So again, this kind of goes back to the idea of organizational efficiency. We want to make sure we're using our funds wisely. Continuous improvement, always trying to better our work. We get to PMP. Anybody PMP certified? That's a pretty popular one. It's project management professional. Anybody study project management in college? So that's another thing. You're in any kind of business or communication or anything like that, you generally have to take project management courses. But I really started thinking, like, all of our programs that we operate are really projects, because we're working towards something and we have to have steps to get there. And then also, anytime you do like a needs assessment or strategic plan, those are major projects. So we need to kind of think of those strategically. So I looked at PMP. They have clear objectives. What do we want to have out of this? How do we get to that step? That's effective planning, engaging stakeholders to get your plans developed, and risk management, looking for the things that could go wrong that you could react to along the way. And then again, continuous monitoring improvement. You see, this is really a big theme as we look through all of these methodologies. Hoshin Kanri, and I guarantee that most of you guys have probably never heard of this one. So this is another one of those foreign Asian methodologies that's used for process implementation. Toyota has used it and such, but I like this one because it's really focused on simplicity. It does have something about organizational-wide strategic alignment, which is another big thing in this network. We have a problem with that, I think. Like I said before, everybody stays on their side of the building, does their own thing, records data in their own way. But this makes sure that everything is aligned in the same place. Simplified plans. Very simple. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute, why that's important. But that is very, very huge. Another piece I love from it is something called catchball or open feedback loops. This is where you engage with your team throughout implementation. And you're listening to them, what works, what doesn't work. Because if you're an executive director and you're not listening to your staff, then you've got a problem, because they're out in the field and they're going to say, hey, this might look good on paper, but it doesn't work for me. It's just not getting us where we want to be. Have you thought about this or this or this? And any EDs in the room? What positions, you guys? Okay. 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 So you guys get that then, right? They put out these grand ideas, and I started out as a caseworker many years ago. I've been doing this for more than half of my life. I'm old. See what community action did to me? That's why I've got the hat on. But no, seriously, I understand that things get out, that they look good on paper, but when you get out to implement it as a caseworker or whatever, you're like, this just doesn't work in real life. And just think if your leadership were to listen to what you had to think and your ideas. And that's why I like catchball. And I teach this to boards, I teach this to executives, because I've been on both sides of this. And I know you've got to listen for it to work. You've got to listen to your team members. So I'm big on this one. And then regular reviews, you go through that you didn't hit your targets for the year. You know, somebody should be watching that along the year and make sure they adjust. Maybe they need to give you guys more training. Maybe they need to give you more resources. There's different things that can be done, but you don't wait till the end of the year and say, oh, why didn't we hit that target? And then if you have the open feedback loops, you're going to know that along the way too. And again, continuous improvement, never being satisfied. Scrum and Agile, you guys heard of that one? So this is really the key piece of that is adaptability and flexibility. And we know that you can have a plan, but things don't always go as planned. So you have to be able to adjust. Also, iterative development or sprints. So you can do big things in short spurts and see how they work and make adjustments as you go along. Team collaboration and communication. And that's not just in your department, but organization-wide, working with each other. Wouldn't that be cool if everybody worked together? And then value-driven. Value-driven. So again, we see that word value. I'm going to hit that again in a minute. And then continuous improvement, which is going across almost all of these. DDDM, or data-driven decision-making. I'm certified in this, and I would encourage you guys, everybody should be certified in this because it's a great certification. And I did it through college, but I think they've got it on Coursera for pretty cheap if you guys are interested in that. So your agency may even pay for it. But it gives you a little bit of an understanding of multiple of these methodologies and how to kind of spit out into them. But objective decision making, so it's not just, oh, my heart feels like we should do this. This is where you go back and look at the data. And strategic data collection. We're really bad at this network for saying, okay, the report says we need to collect this, 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 so we collect that. But in DDDM, you collect data that you need to drive decisions. What does the board need to know? What does the leadership need to know? What do partners need to know in order to make decisions? Even people in the community make decisions, right? Whether they give you money or whether they want to donate their time. Strong analytical processes, so lots of analysis stuff goes on in DDDM. And then informed action. You want to make sure that you are equipped to take action on those things that you learn. And then look, here we go again, continuous monitoring and continuous improvement. So those are the big six that I actually went in and started pulling pieces out of. There's actually multiple others that we've researched and kind of pulled some elements out, but those big six are what we found out really complements Roma to a good degree. And when we did that, we started seeing that there were some changes to the Roma cycle a little bit. So I want to kind of walk through these with you guys today, just so you get a little bit of an understanding of what this Inspire framework is all about. So the first step is what we call identity. And this jumped to the top of the list. So you know in Roma, we don't have anything above the assessment. We talk about the mission a little bit, but we don't really have anything ahead of that. But if we want to be mission aligned and data driven, we need to find out what gives us value. I talked about that a minute ago. And so what gives us value is really in a nonprofit defined by our identity, who we are, what we're trying to achieve in the long run. So where do we start with this? I don't like to just start with a mission. I think we should start with the problem that we were created to address. So for you guys, what do you think that problem is for your agency? What? Poverty. And some agencies may go in deeper. Yours may be specific to seniors. Some may be in on domestic violence a little bit more, but at really kind of the heart of community action, it is poverty. This is from the Economic Opportunity Act of '64. Poverty is at the heart of everything that we do. And it's also in the new theory of change. I talked about this a minute ago, to mobilize communities to fight poverty. So when we hear the word poverty, we generally think about money, right? But the definition is not really just about money. It's about not being able to satisfy your basic needs, however you get those basic needs. Okay? So anybody know who Abraham Maslow is? Yep, heard that name before? So Maslow believed that human needs existed in tiers. So you have your most basic needs, and until you get those physiological needs met, you don't worry about anything else. You're thinking about survival. And then once you get those met, you start thinking about your health and wellness, and until you get those met, you don't think about anything else. And then you get into like love and relationships. And so you kind of build up to the point that you're thinking about moving forward and success. But basic needs fall into 4 categories. You got nutrition, which is your health, your healthy food and clean water. So it's not Cheetos and Coke. It really is the things that make your body function better to survive. We've got shelter, and this is not just 4 walls and a roof, but this is your utilities that keeps you warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and the utilities you have to clean your body and your home environment, and the utilities that stores and prepares your food. Clothing is another big one, what protects your bodies from the environment. And then wellness, which is not just physical health, and we always think of physical health here, but in almost every needs assessment we do, mental health is a bigger problem than physical health. And then safety from abuse and neglect. So this is really what we look at as basic needs. Now, there's 2 degrees of poverty. We have the degree where people don't have those basic needs being met. You guys have seen that, I'm sure. They're homeless, or their utilities are turned off, or maybe they don't have any food in the home. But I think more often than not in this network, people that are vulnerable come in because they don't want to be in crisis. So it's like, I have food today, but I don't have enough money to buy more food, and I'm going to round up before my next paycheck. Or I have a disconnect notice, and my power's on today, but it's not going to be on long because I can't afford it. Or I have an eviction notice. Is that true for you guys as well? It's not necessarily that it's off or we're out. This is what I call about not to have area. And that's usually what we see in agencies. So it's important that we understand this because you guys are supposed to be the experts in poverty. Whether you realize it or not, that's what people look to you for. So we have to understand that problem, and then based on that, we want to think about what the world would look like if that problem was gone. That's the vision. And once we have a vision for what the future would look like if that problem's gone, then we want to figure out how to bridge the gap between the two. And that is the organization's purpose. How to move as far away from that problem as possible and as close to that vision as possible. Now, anybody heard of Peter Drucker? You don't count. You cheat. You're a Roma person. So Peter Drucker is the father of effective business practices. He created one of the first MBA programs for females in the United States. He was an expert in for-profit and non-profit business, military, government. Phenomenal guy. But he basically tells us that the purpose of the organization is reflected in the mission statement. So when I talk about the purpose, that's really what we're thinking about is the organization's mission. Now, mission statement is really designed for 2 things, to bring the people inside the organization together. And I have seen this not happen, to where boards are fighting, and the boards are fighting the executive director, and everybody's got their own ideas of what's going on. If we have a good mission, it should unite the organization, but it should also attract people to the organization that have money and time to give you guys. And that's huge. We really want people to engage with your organization. Now, some common words we see in mission statements, kind of following this up, is stability. We see that word a lot in mission statements. What does that mean? Basically, people have the resources to meet their basic needs on an ongoing basis, but they may have to use a subsidy. Okay? So that's one thing we see. We also see self-sufficiency. And I believe there are 2 degrees of self-sufficiency. We have safety, and if you've done the scaling stuff that's in Roma, you know kind of where this is coming from. But with safety and self-sufficiency, this is where you might say, okay, they've got the money to meet their basic needs on their own, but they don't have a lot of wiggle room. And a lot of us are still there right now. And then thriving is where you've got extra room to maybe upgrade your lifestyle and save up for future issues that could hit you. So this is really the way we see movement out of poverty overall. But these are the words that we see in mission statements, because most of the people coming in are down here. Now, other pieces of organizational identity is values, which really represent your organization's culture. And hopefully they're not just words. It really should be something that represents you guys. Beliefs, this is how your organization understands and connects to the values. And then goals. Some people do these big plans and there's like 1 million goals in it. I just do high-level goals that are on the family, community, and organizational levels. Any questions so far? Are you bored so far? Go get some coffee and come back. I'll try not to bore you. All right, that takes me to the second part. This is navigation. And the idea for me is navigation is where you take a step back and you look at that path forward and you try to determine what stands in the way of success. Now, in Roma, this is where we get into the assessment phase. But think about this a minute. You've got this problem. This is where we are now. We got the vision, which is where you want to be. Your purpose is to move as far from the problem today and get as close to that vision of tomorrow as you can. But we know that there's things that's going to stand in the way, because I don't know any organization that has reached their vision for the future. So that's what I want to do, is just step back and look at the path ahead, use data to find out what's standing in your way. Now, for my Roma friends, we know that these can exist in 3 different areas, right? Family, which is in the lives of people, in the community, which is really like in the infrastructure of the community, and then in the organization itself. So to really find out what those are, we need to do some assessments. We need to do some research. And the first one that we do is external research. We look in the community, and a lot of agencies really kind of flub this, in my opinion. The needs assessments that we do, that internal research, is so often just a checkbox. But we really should be treating them as if we're trying to justify our existence, because we are. And today more than ever. Does poverty exist? Prove it to me, right? If you have a good assessment, you can prove it. Is it really impacting people? And, there's dirty words out there right now. You've got the DEI stuff out there that, we can't talk about that. But is there data that proves that people are not getting jobs because they're female or because they're African American or because they're Hispanic? There is, right? But if we have research to show this stuff, I think it helps us out as far as proving our case. As far as doing a needs assessment, we do need to collect the data first. We do this through surveys and conversations with people, through statistics, looking at the agency data, and most of you guys are putting that data in. So just so you know, it's really important, because that guides the decisions. Sometimes the executives think they're in charge, but it's really your data. So no pressure, but everything you do drives the decisions. Academic research, dig in and see what other studies have said. Community resources, what's out there to help. And then once we have that data collected, we want to organize it well so we can separate that out into different domains. And then within each domain, of course, we look at those statistics and the survey data and the interview transcripts and our focus group transcripts and all these other pieces of type of information. We want to put those under each domain. And then we want to analyze the data. And there's different types of analysis, but it really boils down to questions. So like descriptive analysis is really looking at the numbers. How many people were impacted, or what portion of the community? So you're just asking those questions, and this can get complex. I like to break this down, and I talk about this a lot with agencies as far as analytical processes, because I'm a nerd, in case you hadn't picked up on that yet. But comparing things like, okay, if you've got a poverty rate of 9%, is that good? You know, if you don't have context, you don't know that. But what does it look like on the state level or on the national level or on other communities? So you're just, you're looking at the comparison. You've got trends where you're looking at how things have changed over time. Predictive is what does it look like in the future? Gap analysis is the difference between what is and what should be. Correlation is where you're looking at multiple factors that could impact each other. Mission alignment is not something we really talk about as an analytical process, but we really should be looking at everything, even in a needs assessment, and saying, is this something that our agency should be worried about? And then prioritization, how you take that data and determine which things are the most important. And I use this very nerdy way of figuring that out. So I take the statistics and then the aggregate survey data. So when we ask people in the surveys, is this a problem in your community? And people always check certain things. So we take those, the number of low-income people who experience the issue, and then we look at the gap analysis, so people who couldn't get help in areas that they needed it in. And then we list out the numbers for each of those, under each of these. So we'll have a list of things here: unemployment, underemployment, lack of education, whatever. And then we'll have the number from the Census Bureau or BLS or whatever, numbers from the surveys for each of those. We have from the surveys a number of low-income people who experienced, and then the number of people who said I experienced and couldn't find help. So all of these down the list. So we list those out. We identify the highest number and the lowest number in each one of these groups. And then we choose a desired range. An easy one is 0 to 100. And then we use a statistical formula to convert the actual numbers into a desired range, which is the 0 to 100. So if you're a nerd like me, here's the statistical formula that you can use that. What it basically does is it takes each of these and turns them into a 0 to 100 so that they're weighted the same. Because otherwise, if you just added all these together, this is going to wash out everything else you have, because this is sometimes 20, 30,000, people are unemployed or whatever in a community. So this puts them all in a 0 to 100 so that they're the same weight. And then you just add them across and the normalized amounts together. And then this is optional, but I normalize it again because I just like to have a 0 to 100 number at the end. But that's how I like to determine what things need to be done. Questions, thoughts? Are you still bored? Okay. I'm going to keep checking back with you now that you said that. Okay. We also have internal. What time do we get out of this class, by the way? 2:30? You're going to say 1:46, I know. You're just get me out of here. So internal assessments, this is where we look inside the organization through audits and risk assessments and things like that. I like to take and look at this in two different ways. Those things that we can control as organizations and those things we can't control, the uncontrollables. So I start with the controllable. Again, I like to send surveys out to staff members and to board members and try to get an idea of what they feel like is going on. We do this with conversations as well. If our surveys don't give us enough information, this is where I think that third parties are good, because how many of you guys would probably tell your CEO the truth? Are you one of those? You're just going to say whatever? Yeah, she's not. She's shaking her head no. But yeah, it's hard sometimes, and you're afraid of retribution or whatever. So a lot of agencies, yeah.
It's hard to know how to frame the question,
Mm-hmm.
get that information, it's yes and no, and it's okay, that's the same as it was last year.
Yeah, but it's hard too, though, because people are usually not going to be as honest inside as if they have a third party. So I do think that, yeah, it does take some skill and some experience to kind of figure out how to word these to where you can get the answers out that you want. And sometimes it may take a few questions with different wording to get people to understand. So sometimes you'll have, and it may feel a little repetitive, but the way it hits some people different. But conversations, again, following up with people, looking through agency documents. Spend a lot of time doing that with agencies, just looking to see, okay, is there anything standing out that could get you in trouble, or is there anything standing out that you guys are doing really good, or maybe I just know another agency that you could learn from the way that they do it. Process evaluations, and you guys know what that is? You kind of go through and look at how everything's done and see if it's consistent with all the workers. And okay, when a client comes in the door, where do they go? Okay, some agencies have like an intake specialist or whatever. Sometimes it goes straight to a caseworker. Okay, from there, where does it go? What happens? Okay, if they don't have a bill pay, the agency pays bills. Okay, you do this, where does the payment process go? How long is the client waiting? Okay, now we follow the check payment up through bookkeeping, and we come that back down, back to caseworker. So we follow that process, and we look to see, is that consistent throughout the organization? And then you can go deeper into something called value stream mapping, which this is where you start looking at time as a factor too. So we might see that you're spending 20 minutes with a client, but Miss Betty over there is spending 45 because she just likes to jab. Yeah, but sometimes when you've got 400 people standing in line behind her, that's where it can get frustrating sometimes for the other people. But you want them to be heard, so it is a balance. I will say it's a big balance. But is it necessary to sit there and talk about the gout in your toe for 30 minutes? Because that happens sometimes. I've had those clients before. Have y'all not had those people? That was one of the first things I learned when I got in case management, is never ask what's wrong with them, because they will tell you. All right, so process evaluation, and then there's different areas we want to look at. We look at governance, we look at leadership, at organizational finances and human resources. And this is more than just the human resource department, but do you have enough people? Is the morale good? So we're looking at a broad area of human resources. And do you have the skills that you need? Do you really understand the strategic plan? Do you understand your role? So we go pretty deep in this. Capital resources, this is where we look at even like your desk. Is your desk good enough for you? Do you have the supplies necessary to do your job? Is your internet good enough? So we kind of take this a little broader than normal capital resources. We look at operations, how you serve people, and the satisfaction of customers, things like that. Public relations, this is a biggie everywhere. It's like, do people even know who you are? Do they know where to go if they need help? Do they know what programs operate at what times and that kind of stuff? So this is more than just like trying to get donors, but even your client side. So I'm a communication major, so I love to talk about this side of the world, but I'm not going to do that today. And then data and analytics. Are you collecting the right data? Are you checking your data to make sure that it's clean? Are you actually turning the data into real information? So we look at all of that. And then we have some exclusive processes. We don't use SWOT. We use something called EGCRN. Basically what it does is it looks to see what's out of compliant, what poses a risk to the organization, where is the organization not growing that they should be growing, where are you growing currently, and then where have you really got to a point that you are performing excellent. So this is how we break things down, a little bit different. Going to the uncontrollable side, we use a spectral influence analysis, and this is based on PESTLE. Have you guys heard of PESTLE? So PESTLE is another way of kind of scanning the environment to see what issues are out there, but we modified this to fit a little bit more with just community action world. We added things like community engagement in here, things that are specific to our world. And so once you understand the environment, we use an SQ analysis, which is similar to the EGCRN. You look to see, okay, those things that you can't control, what could undermine your organization? What could make a challenge for you? May not move you forward, but what things could at least help you keep funded? And right now that's a positive, because we're like, okay, are we going to exist after October 1? We don't know. So is there anything we can use, even if it's out of control, anything we can take advantage of that can keep us going through the next few years? To advance, what can positively influence your organization so you can move forward, and then what has the possibility of completely transforming your organization into something else. So this is how we look at those. A little bit different, but something that we kind of learn putting together those different methodologies. All right, any questions or thoughts? Are you still bored? Okay. Any of you guys bored? I'm not sure I believe that, but all right. The next one is strategy. And strategy, of course, is really where we start looking at our planning. It goes along with the planning cycle of Roma. I think one of the biggest things I run into at CAP agencies is they feel like they have to do everything. You know, they look down that CSBG annual report and like, okay, we have to fill something in for every one of these. And that's really not the case. Donald Rumsfeld, who was director of OEO back in the 1970s, he said, given the size of the poverty problem and its own limited resources, the CAA should concentrate its efforts on one or two major objectives where it can have the biggest impact. Y'all ever heard that before? You don't have to do it all. And the more you do, the less effective it is. And so that's what I say. Okay, if you have a case management program, emergency services program, that doesn't break my heart, just to have a couple. You may have a heating assistance program, you may have a senior citizen program, it may be 3, maybe 5 different programs, but if you try to do everything, everything becomes less effective. So try to focus on the areas of expertise where you know you've got the money to take care of it. And then start with those barriers. Pick a few of those that you know you can do and you can do well. And then from that barrier, you pick an outcome. Just one primary outcome. Okay, we have an emergency services program. What is it we're trying to achieve with that? Well, if people can't get to their basic needs, if that's the barrier, then we want them to have those basic needs met. If it's a case management program, we could just say people don't have the money they need to buy their basic needs. And so we say, okay, now they're self-sufficient or they've improved their economic security. That's your outcome. So you've got one predominant outcome that becomes your ultimate measure of success. Now, this is where I say simplicity is important because we work with a lot of organizations every year. And one of the first questions I ask to staff and board is, do you know how to measure success? 40% of staff, 20% of board members know how to measure success. That's of the programs and the organization as a whole. So by simplifying this, we increase that exponentially. So give them something to focus on. This is the success measure for that program. And then the next piece is to have a strategy, just a plan of action that can help you to get rid of this and turn it into this. And when you overturn that barrier, turn it into an outcome, that helps you move closer and closer to your vision. Does that make sense? It just simplifies things. Now, I did say we want to have a single simple measure of success. That doesn't mean you can't measure other KPIs, other indicators, things that may be secondary impacts or things that will measure incremental success. You can still capture those, but that's not your ultimate measure of success. A few tips: be strategic. You should not just have a bunch of services that you do or even isolated strategies. Everything that you do should really be strategic to the point that it is designed to help get rid of that problem, turn it into vision by eliminating barriers. So every service should be moving towards that ultimate goal of the organization, and that's mission alignment. Also, be inclusive. We really shouldn't be operating in silos. You know, whether it's Asian, Head Start, Community Services, most agencies, they're just in their little holes. And they don't know that each other exists. They don't want to know that each other exists. And that really shouldn't be the way that we operate. Several years ago, I was on Tybee Island in Georgia on a business trip, and I ran into this little guy. Anybody know what that is? A what? Not a jellyfish. That's what I thought too. It's a great white whale. Just kidding. No, I took pictures of it, and I went back to the front desk because I was amazed because the sun was hitting. It's beautiful, that blue, just amazing. But I took a picture. I went back to the hotel, and I asked the lady at the hotel, I'm like, what kind of jellyfish is this? And she's like, that is not a jellyfish. It's a good thing you didn't touch it. It's a Portuguese man of war. And Portuguese man of war, the cool thing is they're not even a single organism. They're a colony called a siphonophore. And it's actually multiple different things that live together. So you've got on the top a pneumatophore, which is the polyp, and its job is to float through the water. So the colony has a way of moving. And then it can also deflate the gas up there and go under the water if there's birds or something coming by to protect the colony. Gonozoids, their whole job is reproduction. So no jokes, guys. Keep it proper here. Then we have gastroids. Their whole job is digestion. And then dactylozoids, they locate and catch prey. They're completely different organisms, and the cool thing is that they all have shared DNA, but they're separate, working on one single mission, which is survival and reproduction, but they all have completely different jobs. But if any one of them was gone, the colony would just die out. Because like if you didn't have the dactylozoids, you wouldn't have anything for the gastroids to digest, and so it would all die out. But if you caught prey but you didn't have anybody to digest it, you'd die. And if the pneumatophore is not up there, you're just going to be laying on the bottom of the water. So every piece is important. And I think it's the same way in our organizations. We shouldn't be looking at ourselves as separate entities, but one shared DNA with different roles that still go to that one shared mission. Does that make sense to you guys? Did you have a question, or are you just playing with your pen? Okay. And another thing I think is important when we're looking at our strategy is we should have a very straightforward and detailed data plan. Seth Godin, I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a very popular marketing strategist. He says, measurement is fabulous unless you're busy measuring what's easy to measure as opposed to what is important. It's easy sometimes just to capture what's in that CSBG annual report or in the PIR, but sometimes that doesn't tell the full story of what we need to know in order to really drive success in the agency. So I think that it's important that leaders sit down and think through what is the goal of what we're trying to do, what data we need to know in order to make sure that we're successful and we can continuously improve. So any questions? You guys look a little bit more awake. Performance is the next one. So performance is where we actually go out and do. It equates to the implementation phase of Roma. And for this phase, I like to think about a phrase that was heard in Star Wars. Any Star Wars fans? Oh my gosh, you can leave now. So in Star Wars, there's a scene where they have found this weakness in the Death Star. And they're flying their ships through this big trench to go blow up the Death Star. And here come the enemies, and they're shooting at them with their TIE fighters. And there's these distractions coming up, which like that happens to us. Sometimes there's somebody loud in the room. You've got one rogue board member that kind of throws everything off, or you've got one crazy person that's on your staff that always like to hijack meetings. I used to have one of those. Her name was Christy at my agency, and we'd do lie heap training, and we talk about like, okay, you've got somebody who's homebound. Well, if they walk in there and their leg falls off, would that be homebound? So there's those kind of people, and they're distractions. But in Star Wars, when they're going down the trench, the enemy's shooting on them, and there's this one guy that says, his call sign's Red 3, and he says, I can't hold it. And another guy says, stay on target, because he knows if they blow up the Death Star, then they beat the enemy. Now, if you veer off and you start fighting those little distractions, you blow up one little ship, there's going to be many others that come out and attack you. You remember that part in the movie? You remember the part where stay on target? Yeah. Yeah, the big thing at the end there in the first one. So this is huge. I think that we really need to focus on staying on target in our work and make sure we're focusing on poverty and we don't get distracted just by paying utility bills or just paying rent payments. Those are big things, but if you keep paying utility bills and that's all you do, poverty's still out there and it's probably getting worse. So keep that in mind. Another thing I'd like to point out here is something called strategy drift. Now, we talk about mission drift, where you, as an organization, you drift away strategically from your mission. But strategy drift is where you've got this plan in place, but those daily distractions just take their toll. And so you're just doing whatever it takes to survive. And I think we've got to be careful about that. Also, and this is not as much for you guys as it is for board members and leaders, committing resources is important. Peter Drucker says if you don't commit resources, you don't even have a plan. You just got promises and hopes. And then for you guys, this is key. Make sure you document your progress. You ever heard this phrase? If it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. My wife's speaking in the other room. She works with me full time now, but she's also a registered nurse. And this is a big thing in her world. So if you don't give medicine, then somebody could die. So if you give medicine and don't document it, that's dangerous. But it's also the same thing for our world. And we don't think about it in the social world as much. But if somebody is about to be homeless and you don't do something, don't write it down, or you do something, don't write it down, things can be missed. And we want to make sure that we are really preparing people to become self-sufficient. So we have to have the data. We have to make sure that data is complete and that it's accurate, because if it's not complete and accurate, then it's bad data. And when you analyze bad data, you get bad information. When you interact with bad information, you get bad knowledge, and that leads to bad decisions. So you guys have a lot of pressure on you to do things right. All right, inspection is where we analyze. This equates to the evaluation phase of Roma. I kind of skip over results. We'll come back to results. So in our Roma trainings, this is something that you probably see familiar. We can say our targeted performance at 80 out of 100 or 80% will obtain employment in 12 months. Does that look familiar? You all seen this before? Or something like it? So this is our targeted performance, and then at the end of the year, it may say, okay, well, only 60 out of 100 or 60% obtained employment in 12 months, and so we go, okay, 60 as compared to 80. To what is it? What's the range? Yeah, so 80 to 120. I'm just testing you. Okay, and don't ever say 60 out of 80 here, because Barbara Mooney will have an aneurysm. 60 as compared to 80. I was teaching a course on artificial intelligence a few weeks ago with 8 states, and Barbara Mooney was on the call, and the AI actually said 60 out of 80, and I thought she was going to have a heart attack. But anyway, 60 as compared to 80, or 60 divided by 80, is equal to 75% success rate. What did you say the range was? So is 75 good? It's under 80, so we're out of the range. But I want to take you another step. I'm also certified in Six Sigma. I'm a black belt in Six Sigma. And it goes a little bit deeper. Six Sigma is really looking at the standard deviation away from a target. So if we told what our target was, I did a little bit of adaptation with Six Sigma, so we have a standard deviation of 6.67, because the initial Six Sigma is really created for business where you go and have thousands and thousands or millions and millions. We don't usually have that many in our world. So we did an adaptation, standard deviation of 6.67. So that means that 1 sigma would be 66.67 to 133. That's a critical range. That's really low. Okay. 1 sigma is not good. 2 sigma is unacceptable. That gives you to 73.33 to 126.67. 3 sigma, that puts us in our 80 to 120, which is acceptable. 4 sigma, 86.67 to 113, which is good. 5 Sigma 93.33 to 106.67, which is optimal, and then 6 Sigma, which is statistical perfection. That's your 100%. And that's where we want to be with our performance targeting. So when we look at that 75%, that puts it as 2.75 Sigma, which is unacceptable performance. So this just helps you dive a little bit deeper into that. Now let's take a look at this in context. So if we had a grant, let's say that we got $15,000 for, I know this is low, but this just helps you understand the process of evaluating. We have a grant, we get $15,000. With that $15,000, we can say we can serve 200 people. So if you take $15,000, divide it by 200 people, that's $75 per person roughly that you'll be spending. You with me so far? All right, out of the 200, we can look back and say, okay, we estimate out of the 200 that 80 will be successful. 15,000 divided by 80 gives us $187 per person for our product, which is our success. Whatever you produce, the obtained a job or improved education, that's the product of your organization. So this is our plan, but when we actually get down to the end of the year, let's say that we only spent $6,000. Is that good or is that bad? Why is it bad? They may not give you money again, right, ever. So you didn't spend $15,000, and you do that a couple of years, they're going to be like, why am I giving you $15,000? So, yeah, your funders are going to start looking at that. So that's 40%. You spent 40% of the money that you were allocated. Now, you planned that you would serve 200 people. You only served 35. So we know that you spent less money, so we expect that you'll serve less people, right? But is 35 good as compared to percentage-wise? Do you think that's acceptable when you spend less money? Is 35 okay out of 6,000 as compared to 200 out of 15,000? Yeah. Okay, let's get it. This is how we do it. $6,000 divided by 35 gives us a cost per client of $171. So it costs a lot more per person, almost double, or actually more than double per person. So that's an easy way to analyze that out. And then, look at this. You spent 40% of the money, but you only helped 17.5% of the people. So you spent more money. You helped less people than you did spend money. If you're going to spend 40% of the money, you should have served 40% of the clients. Does that make sense? Now, let's look at the next one. 3 successes out of 35. So is 3 successes out of 35 comparable to 80 out of 200? Is that good? No? So not good? All right. 6,000 divided by 3 is $2,000 per outcome as opposed to the 187 that you said you were going to do. That's more than 10 times what you said you were going to spend. Now, we hear this a lot. People say, well, I'm sure they just forgot to document it, or they just didn't go back in and hit the outcome and change it to approved or whatever. But again, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. This is what Congress sees, this is what your state office sees, this is what your board sees. So 3 is 3. And we also have to go to the other side. If you are saying, okay, just because I referred you to child support enforcement, that does not necessarily mean that they got child support. So if you're documenting things that didn't happen or you didn't verify happened, that's actually called fraud. And it doesn't matter if it was intentional or negligent, you can get in trouble. Now I got you all scared. So let's look at this. You did 40% you took 40% of the money, you did 17% of the work, and you provided less than 4% of the product you said you would deliver. And this may look crazy. You're like, oh, that's nuts, that's low. But this is stuff we see regularly. And I mean, $15,000 is not a realistic grant. We usually see $100,000, sometimes $1 million grants. So these numbers are going to be a little bit higher, but it's still, these percentages, we see this all the time. Follow-up's not done, staff delete outcomes or don't put them in the first place. And this is what our funders see. And this is one of the reasons I think that we're kind of in trouble nationally right now. We have to really make sure we're doing this right. So if we go back to our Six Sigma scale, where do we fall in as far as performance targeting? 0.06% Sigma, which is targeting failure. No, that's as low as it gets. Now, I do have a calculator I created on my website. This is at sahowco.com under resources on there. And you can actually put in your projected success and your actual success, and it will give you the targeting accuracy, like Roma we teach down here, but it also gives you that Sigma level. So something you can play with. It's just a tool I made to help people kind of learn a little bit more about that world. All right, any questions on that? Okay, I think we're doing good on time. You said 2:30, is that what you said? Okay. Now, the next piece is reporting. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but this takes us back a little bit to the results phase of Roma, observe and report progress. I like to think about this a little bit deeper than just giving our, just giving our funders a report. That's usually what we think about here. But let's go back again to 1970. Donald Rumsfeld said, a CAA's effectiveness, therefore, is measured not only by the services which it provides, but more important by the things that you do, by the improvements and changes it achieves in the community's attitudes and practices toward the poor. So this is big. You aren't the only ones making decisions about your organization. Your data is driving decisions for funders, for clients, for potential volunteers, for politicians. So we want to make sure our data is good and that we report that data out strategically. Anybody heard of the SRAM model of communication? So this is what we use in our organization. Basically, what you have to do is you have to identify a receiver. Who is it that you're communicating with? And you want to strategically communicate differently to different populations. The message that your client needs to hear could be different from that what a politician needs to hear. Wouldn't you agree? And even the language you use may be different. So you identify the different receivers, and then for each of those, you construct a message that's for that particular population. And then you want to consider the channel. How are you going to reach them? Because you may reach clients on Facebook. Your politicians may not be there. They may be on LinkedIn. They may be on X. So you have to look at where you can reach them. Even if it's social media is different for different populations. You're going to get your older populations. Do you think they're going to be on TikTok? Are your senior citizens on TikTok? She's left me. They're not going to be there. No. They may be reading the newspaper, or they may be watching your local TV channel. So you just have to be strategic. You know, are you going to put your senior programs on TikTok? Probably not. But you also don't want to put your youth program in the newspaper, because they're never going to pick a newspaper up. I haven't touched a newspaper in probably 30 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And social media is where it's at today. It really is. Maybe not your clients, especially like your LIHEAP and some of those programs. You're not going to have as much of that. But if you're looking for investors or volunteers, you've got to go wherever that audience is. They're not necessarily going to come to a Facebook page. Some of them don't go to Facebook, but you might get them on Instagram. So you have to think about who you're trying to reach and think about the channel to get there. And then, this is a big one. When you send a message, you're encoding your thoughts. This is your interpretation of what you're saying, okay? But it's not always decoded the way you intended it. And the reason is because of noise. And now, in this room, noise could be somebody talking outside the door. It can be physical noise like that, or somebody doing construction in the building. But it can also just be bias. You could say, I don't like women, or I don't like men, or I don't like black people, or white people, or I don't like Hispanics, or whatever it is. I don't like them. So whatever you say, I'm going to filter it out. I don't like the word, I don't like DEI. You say that word, I'm going to turn you off. So people will turn you off just because of the way you look or the way you sound or the words that you use. And we have a very separated political environment. And, I'm not a party guy, so you get too far left or too far right, I'm like here in the middle, like, where the heck y'all going? So somehow we've got to think about how to communicate people with our message and show we can be both sides of this, because yes, we help people, but we also are helping people to become self-sufficient. So this program is the most bipartisan program that exists if we communicate that right, but our message has to be towards each population as much as we can. And some of the communication things we're having to do right now are just not fair for people. And it bothers me so bad to not say diversity or not to say DEI, because to me it's important, and I know discrimination is a problem. And it's not just your race or ethnicity, but gender is an issue too. I'm married to a woman, so I know that. But we have to think though about the noise and how we can communicate with people to get them to understand there is value in your organization. And get them to understand, your mission, who you are, so that they want to become a part of your mission. And to me, agencies want to do all these big fundraising plans, and to me it's let's just communicate them to the point, communicate with them to where they understand who you are and what you're doing and how it benefits them. Then they'll just give you money. They'll want to be a part of you. It's not just about going and try to find money, but let's make them want to be part of you. So that's my fundraising point. All right, last one is enrichment. Enrichment is very easy. If we look at the Roma cycle, do you see anything that might pertain to enrichment? It's here. It's the arrows. We don't really pay a whole lot of attention to those, but these arrows are about continuous improvement, and that's what this is about. You see, okay, yes, we've run this program, it's a good program, we believe in it, we care about it, but our caseworkers are just not equipped to do this. We might need to give them some more training, or give them the money they need to do the job right, or give them the internet access to document things. Because, okay, you're sitting on the front line, you've got 5 people sitting outside your door, your internet's too slow to document stuff. Are you going to let things go? Be honest. Yep, I don't blame you. You got too much to do, you don't want to let the client down, so data gets dropped. So internet speeds are big to me. But this whole area takes me back to this. What makes an organization excellent? And the idea is never being satisfied. Always look for ways to improve. Always look for ways to be better, regardless of what your role is. And you don't have to be an executive director, even a program director, to focus on excellence. You be excellent. You lead with excellence from where you are, and people will follow. They'll see you're doing something amazing. Like I said, I started as a caseworker, and I've had this excellent mentality my entire life. I was just raised with this. My dad always said, do your work as unto the Lord. It's kind of his, and I always did. I always thought, okay, I'm doing this for a bigger cause than myself. This is not just about me. It's not just about getting a check, but there's people out there in poverty. There's people that are hurting. I want to change the world, and I want to do it for the greater good of everything. And so I always look for better ways to do things. That rose me through the ranks of the organization. But even when I wasn't the top dog, people were always following me because I was looking for innovative ways to do things that made life easier. You all can do that from wherever you are. So keep that in mind. Don't ever be satisfied and think this is just the way we have to do business. Any questions? Any thoughts? I appreciate you guys staying awake this whole time. Again, this is the Mission Aligned Data-Driven Approach to Organizational Excellence. It's just a little bit different way of looking at Roma and then putting those other methodologies into perspective. If you want to know more, let me know. I'm glad to help you guys out. And did everybody in here get a book? I'll let y'all, we have a short, small group, so you can have them, yeah. We have a small group today, so you guys can, fresh off the presses. It is, and that's, I've got multiple credentials in analytics, and I'm a communication major, and I think that those two marry each other very closely. Turning the data into a story and then communicating that story well. And you don't have to be the expert in it. Somebody in your organization or a consultant or contractor, you just need to have that ability somewhere to do that. But that's huge. That's how you get people in. I've got friends and organizations that do it well. They're the ones that aren't relying on CSBG. I mean, if CSBG goes away, they're like, okay, there's a little bit of money. But most agencies are not there. All right, any other questions or comments or thoughts? Oh, you guys are awesome. So this goes to my website. If you guys want to scan that, you can go there and look around. There's more information on there. 1, 2, and everybody's got a book, whoopee-doo. This is what you get for coming into my class today. So I hope you enjoy it, and seriously, reach out. I would love to know your thoughts on the book when you get finished reading it. So let me know what you think, and if there's anything, even if there's something you disagree with or whatever, let me know, because to me, even this process is being continuously improved. And so if you think of something new or you think of something that you don't agree with, let me know. I'm open-minded. All right, guys, thank you so much. I got you out a little bit early. So, woohoo. And I'm not teaching any more classes today, but you are welcome to go listen to my wife in the next session if you want to after lunch, or after break. She's in A. This is C, right? Yeah, this is C. She's 2 over that way. She's doing like personality stuff. She has a background. She's a registered nurse and a mental wellness coach, and she's got also a degree in business focused on HR. So she said, it's on, at this one I think she's doing like the personality types and stuff like that, trying to understand who you are and how to work with the people in your organization. Yeah, she's doing, it's really 2 different ones, but they kind of can join together, but she's doing one now and then a different one that's related to it after this break. Yeah. Yeah, something like, yeah, growth mindset or something. Something like that. But it can be, you can go to those separate, so just so you know. You can. Yeah, you don't have to go to the whole thing. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. And if anybody's listening online, thank you so much for joining us, and sorry you weren't able to join us in the room. We'll be signing off until the next course.